All right, so lately I've been thinking a lot about blockchain and how it's shaking up accounting. I came across this research paper. It's called Impacts of Blockchain on Accounting in the Business. It's in Sage Open. It really got me thinking. What I found really interesting is that it not only goes into the technical side, but it also looks at what's happening in the real world, specifically in Vietnam. What are your thoughts on this?
It's definitely a fascinating topic. What's interesting about this paper is that it cuts through all the hype and examines the real effects of using blockchain. You're right, Vietnam is a hotbed for blockchain adoption. And this paper gives us valuable insights into how it's being used there.
So I'm already pretty familiar with blockchain, but I'm curious to hear how this paper explains how it actually works. Can we skip the whole blockchain as a digital ledger analogy and jump right into the more technical details?
Absolutely. The paper lays out a 5-step process to illustrate how blockchain works. They use the example of two agents, A and B. Let's say Agent A wants to send some cryptocurrency to Agent B. The first step is that they initiate the transaction.
Okay, that makes sense. So what happens next?
The second step is super important. The transaction is broadcasted to the entire network. Think of it like sending out a public announcement that everyone can see.
Got it. So it's not just a private exchange between A and B. What's step number 3?
This is where things get really interesting. The network nodes. These are basically computers on the blockchain. They validate the transaction. They check to make sure Agent A has enough funds and that everything is legitimate.
So it's like a huge verification process.
Yeah,
To make sure everything is on the up and up.
precisely. And this is where this idea, a hash, comes in. Every transaction is given a unique digital fingerprint, this hash, which is then added to a block. Then this block gets linked to the block before it, creating a chain, hence the name blockchain.
Okay. I think I'm starting to understand how the whole chain thing works, but what makes it so secure? Couldn't someone just tamper with one of the blocks?
That's the really smart part about using these hash functions. Even the smallest change to the transaction data would completely change the hash, making it totally obvious that something had been changed. Plus, the entire blockchain is distributed across the entire network, so there's no single point of failure.
Wow. That's really clever. So what's the last step in this process?
Once the block is validated and added to the chain, the transaction is complete, and everyone on the network has an unchangeable record of it. That's the real power of blockchain. Transparency and security built right in.
It sounds like a system built on trust.
Yeah.
But how does all of this apply to accounting? I mean,
Hmm.
accountants already use ledgers and transactions.
That's true. But imagine a world where those ledgers are automatically updated, reconciled, and verified in real time. That's what blockchain can do. This paper talks about the idea of triple entry bookkeeping, where every party involved in a transaction has a record of it at the same time.
So instead of having separate ledgers that need to be reconciled, it's like there's one universal source of truth that everyone can access.
Exactly. This gets rid of any discrepancies, reduces errors, and makes audits much easier. Plus, things like tracking where assets came from or verifying ownership become much simpler and more transparent.
Okay, I see how this could make things way more efficient. But does this mean that robots are going to be taking over accounting jobs?
Not exactly. The paper actually argues that blockchain won't replace accountants altogether, but it will change what they focus on. Instead of doing routine tasks, they'll be able to focus on more strategic roles. Think analysis, interpretation, and providing high-level financial insights.
So it's less about crunching numbers and more about being a financial detective.
Exactly. Accountants will need to be able to understand blockchain data, identify trends, and offer strategic advice. It's a shift toward a more analytical and advisory role.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So what does the paper say about how blockchain is being used in accounting right now?
Well, it focuses on 6 key industries in Vietnam, where blockchain adoption is happening really fast.
Yeah.
Fertilizer, steel manufacturing, plastic packaging, rubber processing, minerals, and food processing.
That's quite a diverse group. Why those industries in particular?
They were chosen because they all rely heavily on accurate record keeping, transparency, and trust in their supply chains. The paper found that information technology, and importantly, proper training, are the biggest factors driving blockchain adoption in these sectors.
So it's not just about having the technology. People need to know how to use it well.
Absolutely. And the impact of blockchain adoption has been pretty significant. The paper gives examples like MeInvoice.vn. It's an e-invoice software built on blockchain. It lets businesses create and manage invoices electronically, which saves them time and money, but also increases security and reduces the chance of fraud.
Okay, so we're already seeing real-world applications. Did the paper mention any other specific examples?
Yes, They talk about how MISA, which is a popular accounting software in Vietnam, has integrated blockchain. To manage transactions with banks and beneficiaries, this creates a smooth and secure flow of information between different parties. It's a great example of how existing systems can be improved with blockchain technology.
This is all really fascinating. But what does the paper say about the bigger picture? What's the impact of blockchain going to be on the future of accounting? Any big predictions?
Well, the paper suggests that blockchain isn't just a passing trend, it's a fundamental shift in how we deal with financial data. It argues that the accounting profession needs to change and adapt to use this technology.
So it's a call to action for the entire industry.
Exactly. The paper emphasizes how important training and professional development are for accountants if they want to succeed in this new blockchain-driven world. It also looks into some really interesting new trends like smart accounting.
Okay, hold on. Smart accountant. That
Ah,
sounds intriguing. What exactly is that?
this is where things get really futuristic. Imagine smart contracts that are connected to a company's physical environment through technologies like IoT and sensors. This would allow them to track sales, inventory, production, all in real time.
So it's like having a continuous automated audit of everything that's happening. Tell me more.
We'll definitely get into that in the next part of our deep dive. It's a concept with a ton of potential to completely change businesses from the inside out.
Okay, I'm definitely hooked. But before we move on, can you quickly summarize the key takeaways from this first part, just to make sure I'm on the same page?
Sure. We've seen how blockchain works. It's more than just a digital ledger. We talked about transaction broadcasting, network validation, hash functions, and how blocks are created. We also talked about how blockchain is being used in the real world, especially in those Vietnamese case studies, and how it's not just hype, it's actually providing real benefits like increased efficiency, security, and trust.
That's a great summary. And I have a feeling that this is just the beginning. I can't wait to dive deeper in the next part.
So, as we were talking about all those real-world applications in Vietnam, I started thinking about the more practical aspects of it all. Using blockchain for accounting sounds good in theory, but what are some of the real-world challenges? The challenges that businesses and accounting professionals need to actually deal with?
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the excitement about new technology, but there are always going to be obstacles, right? What are some of the things that might trip people up?
One of the biggest challenges is that there's no real standardization. Blockchain is still evolving really quickly, and there are all these different platforms and protocols out there, each one with its own little quirks.
So it's like trying to build a house with bricks and tools from different sets.
Exactly. This lack of standardization makes it hard for businesses to choose the right solution and to make sure their systems can actually work together. And it's not just businesses. Regulators are also trying to catch up, figuring out how to regulate these blockchain accounting practices. There are concerns about data privacy, security, and how to conduct audits in this new environment.
It sounds like the Wild West out there.
Yeah.
And what about the accountants themselves? What do they need to know? To be successful in this blockchain world, can't just be business as usual, right?
No, definitely not. There's going to be a learning curve. Accountants are going to need a good understanding of blockchain, like cryptography, consensus mechanisms, which is how decisions are made on the blockchain, and of course, smart contracts.
So are we talking about accountants becoming coders now?
Not really. It's more about understanding the basic concepts and how they relate to accounting. But it's not just about the technical stuff either. They'll need to sharpen their analytical skills and their critical thinking skills. To make sense of all this blockchain data, think of it as being like a financial detective. You're tracing transactions, identifying patterns, and assessing risks. But in this blockchain environment,
Okay, that sounds pretty intense. Do accountants need to become tech experts overnight?
it's more about adapting and evolving. They're going to need to work closely with IT professionals and data scientists, getting comfortable working in these mixed teams.
So it's a team effort to harness the power of blockchain. But let's focus on the positive side for a minute. What kinds of opportunities does blockchain create for accountants?
Oh, tons. We already talked about how blockchain can automate a lot of tasks. This frees up accountants so they can concentrate on more valuable things. It's like trading in your old calculator for a crystal ball. Instead of spending hours and hours reconciling spreadsheets, accountants can use that time for analysis, consulting, and planning.
It's like finally getting rid of all those shoeboxes full of receipts and actually having time to think about the big picture.
Exactly. Blockchain also opens up new possibilities for audit and assurance. Because you have this tamper-proof record of every transaction, audits become more efficient and reliable. Auditors can even watch transactions in real time, preventing fraud from happening in the first place. It's like having a security camera on your financial records.
That's really impressive. But what about opportunities outside of traditional accounting? You mentioned decentralized finance earlier. DeFi, what role does blockchain play there?
Well, DeFi is basically reinventing financial services
Yeah.
using blockchain. Think about things like lending, borrowing, trading, even insurance, all without having to use traditional banks. Because these platforms are decentralized, they're usually more transparent, more efficient, and more affordable than traditional financial institutions.
So it's like giving people more control over their own money, cutting out the middleman.
Exactly. And this is where accountants can really make a difference. These DeFi platforms are becoming more and more complex, and there's a real need for professionals who can audit them, provide assurance services, and help businesses understand how to navigate this new financial landscape.
So accountants could be like the trusted guides. In this
Yeah.
new world of decentralized finance, what a change from just balancing the books. But let's be realistic for a second. Not every accountant is going to turn into a blockchain expert overnight. What are some practical steps they can take to get ready for this blockchain future?
That's a great question. It all starts with being proactive, taking the initiative to learn. Accountants should start educating themselves about blockchain. There are tons of resources online, courses, and certifications. And don't be afraid to get hands-on. Try out different blockchain platforms, maybe even try to build some simple applications, just to get a feel for how it all works in practice.
So don't just read about it in a textbook. Get your hands dirty.
Absolutely. And don't forget about networking, joining industry groups, and going to conferences, especially ones focused on blockchain and its uses in accounting. You can get a lot of valuable information and connections that way.
It's like learning the language
Yeah.
and then immersing yourself in the culture. What about the businesses themselves? What can they do to prepare for this blockchain revolution?
They need to take a hard look at themselves, assess what they're doing now, identify areas where blockchain could make things better. Are they spending too much time on manual reconciliation? Are there problems with their supply chain? Are there concerns about data security or transparency? These are all things that blockchain could potentially fix.
It's like doing a blockchain audit of your own business.
You got it. Once you've found those problem areas, you can start looking at different blockchain platforms and solutions. Talk to vendors, go to industry events, connect with other businesses that have already used blockchain, learn from their mistakes, find the right solution for your specific needs.
So it's not just about jumping on the bandwagon. Find the right tool for the job.
Exactly. And here's a crucial point. Get your accounting team involved right from the start. They're going to be the ones using the technology, so their input and expertise are incredibly important.
It's about making your team the champions of this new technology. But let's zoom out for a minute. We've talked about all the technical stuff, the challenges, the opportunities. But what does this mean for society as a whole? What are the bigger implications of blockchain?
That's when things start to get really interesting. Blockchain has the potential to create a more transparent world, a world where people are held accountable. Imagine a future where you can track every financial transaction and you know no one can tamper with them, where supply chains are ethical and sustainable, and where data privacy is built into this system.
Now I'm getting chills. It's pretty amazing to think that a technology that started with Bitcoin could end up having such a huge impact on the world.
It really is.
Yeah.
And remember, we've only just begun to explore what's possible.
I can't wait to see what happens next. But before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, are there any key takeaways you want our listeners to think about?
I think the most important thing to remember is that blockchain isn't just a fad. It's a technology that's here to stay, and it's going to change everything. It's about more than just automating tasks. It's about making things more transparent, improving data security, and creating a system we can all trust. And the last thing, we need to change our mindset to really embrace blockchain. It's about being open and honest, working together, and being willing to challenge the way things have always been done.
That's a really powerful message. As we head into the final part of our deep dive, I want everyone listening to think about the role of blockchain in their own lives. How can you use this technology to make a positive impact? Let's explore those possibilities together in our next segment. All right, welcome back. So far, we've really dug into how blockchain works, explored how it could change accounting, and even peeked into a future where decentralized finance is the norm. But what I'm really excited about is seeing how blockchain is already making a real difference. Can we talk about some concrete examples?
Absolutely. Let's start with auditing. It's usually a pretty labor-intensive process,
Hmm.
and it takes a lot of time. Blockchain can really streamline that. Remember those companies in Vietnam we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
Well, the research paper mentions one company that started using blockchain, and they saw their audit costs go down by 20%, all thanks to blockchain's transparency and immutability. That's a pretty huge
Oh,
deal.
20%. That's a lot of savings.
Yeah.
So no more auditors buried in paperwork.
It's not about getting rid of auditors, it's about making their jobs easier and more efficient. With blockchain, auditors have a tamper-proof record of all the transactions, so they can focus on the areas that are riskier and give better advice. It's like having a superpowered magnifying glass for your financial records.
Okay, I'm starting to see why this is so appealing. What other areas are being impacted by blockchain?
Supply chain management is another big one. Imagine being able to track a product's entire journey, from where the raw materials came from, all the way to the final delivery, and all of that on an immutable blockchain. This level of transparency is great for businesses. It helps them optimize their supply chains, but it also builds trust with their customers.
So are you saying I could actually track my coffee beans back to the farm where they were grown? That's pretty cool.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just tracking. Blockchain can also automate payments and contracts, for example. You could set up a smart contract that automatically pays a supplier once the goods have been delivered and verified. This eliminates delays and disputes.
It sounds like a major improvement. In terms of efficiency and trust, are there any other examples that really show the power of blockchain?
We've talked a lot about decentralized finance, DeFi, but I think it's worth emphasizing again how much potential it has to completely change the way finance works. Think of it as a whole new financial system built on blockchain. You have things like lending, borrowing, trading, even insurance, and you don't need traditional banks.
So it's like a more accessible financial system? That's more transparent too. That's a big deal.
It is. DeFi is still in its early stages, but it's growing really fast, and accountants are going to be essential in this space. As these platforms get more complex, there's going to be more and more demand for professionals who can audit them, provide assurance, and help businesses understand this new world.
So accountants could become the go-to experts in this new world of decentralized finance. It's a pretty big shift from just keeping the books balanced.
It is. It's not just about keeping up with the technology, though. It's about understanding what it all means and helping other people figure it out, too.
So it's a call to action for accountants
Yeah.
to step up
Yeah.
and become the leaders in this blockchain world.
Exactly. But it's not just about accountants. Blockchain has the potential to change all of society. If we have a better way to manage data and transactions, more transparent, more secure, more efficient, it can empower people, help create new ideas, and boost the economy.
You've given me a lot to think about, but let's be real for a second. Blockchain is still new, and there are bound to be some challenges along the way. What are some of the biggest obstacles?
Scalability is a big one. As blockchain networks get bigger, they can get slower and more expensive to use. People are working on solutions. But it's an ongoing challenge. Regulation is another hurdle. Governments are still trying to figure out how to regulate all these blockchain activities. We need clear and consistent rules to encourage innovation while also protecting consumers and investors.
So we need to find a balance between encouraging growth and making sure the growth is responsible.
Precisely. And maybe the biggest challenge of all is education and adoption for blockchain to really live up to its potential. People and businesses need to understand how it works and be willing to use it.
So things like this deep dive are really important to get the word out there.
Absolutely. By talking about the basics, showing how blockchain is being used in the real world, and discussing the challenges and the opportunities, we can help people make informed decisions about how they want to use this technology.
That's a great point. Any final thoughts for our listeners?
Don't just sit back and watch this blockchain revolution happen. Learn about it. Explore the possibilities. Find ways to use it to make a positive impact in your own life and in the world.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Uh,
Thanks for taking us on this incredible journey through the world of blockchain and accounting.
it's been my pleasure.
And to all of our amazing listeners, thank you for joining us on the deep dive. Keep those curious minds engaged, and we'll see you on our next episode.